bring in John Steele Gordon. Huge fan of his books, and of course, for years we would read religiously his American Heritage columns. It is wonderful to have you. We've talked 3 or 4 times, and I don't think we've ever met. Here is a book. I love this book, Hamilton's Blessing, The Extraordinary Life and Times of Our National Debt. Albert Gallatin's sculpture is out in front of the Treasury building. But Hamilton got it going, didn't he?
Indeed.
What did he do about our debt? What is unique that Hamilton did about our debt?
What he did was he funded it properly, and he got it, organized, and he made it so sure that there was a revenue stream that within 5 years our bonds were selling at a 10% premium in Europe.
I think of Angel in Our Whirlwind, which was that 1-volume Benson Bobrick, which was based off of the movie The Patriot, was taken much from that. Were we a confident nation 2 or 3 years after this war of our wars, the Revolutionary War?
No, the late 1780s were a terrible time in this country because the Articles of Confederation simply weren't working. The federal government didn't have enough power to function properly. It couldn't even tax. It had to ask the states for money, and of course the states, some of them said, no, we're not sending you any money.
You had too much information. Let's bring it up here. Of these times, this is a bad chart. I'm sorry, folks. There's a lot of optimism to talk about. John Steele Gordon on our, I just invented this word, unconfidence. It's a Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index, high frequency, and you can see it's rolled over. It is very near the record low of February '09. With your perspective on our financial history, exactly how unconfident are we right now?
We're very unconfident because we don't know what the future is, and uncertainty is something that markets hate and investors hate and people hate. And that's the big problem right now is nobody knows what's going to happen in the election, what taxes are going to be, because we're in for a very big election. What
is your prescription for solving this confidence? I mean, we came out of the Depression. Many would say we needed a war in the depths of Guadalcanal to jumpstart the nation in the early 40s into some kind of output. How do you jumpstart lousy confidence?
Well, I certainly wouldn't recommend World War III.
That would be true.
Yeah. No, I think what we need is clear policy coming out of Washington right now. I think we're in pretty much in gridlock in Washington. We have a president who has a very strong ideology. The people didn't like that in 2010. They put in a Republican House that also has a strong ideology that's not the same.
You look at the Republican candidates, you look at their sound bites, their efforts. We're going to focus in our debate on the economy. Are these candidates afraid to talk about the economy?
They seem to be.
Yes. Why is that?
Well, because when you're running
was Teddy Roosevelt? He wanted to talk about the economy.
Yeah, well, of course, it was a different era then. He didn't have television to worry about and things like that. Today, when you're running for president, if you get too specific, you get eaten alive. And therefore, the art is to sound like you have strong policies without actually revealing too much about what they might be.
You don't want to reveal what they are. I hope that Charlie Rose can do that in our debate. Here's a chart. Our national anxiety. Real personal disposable income. I love this chart. It's everything, John, except logarithmic. There's a regression. There's the good times. There's a path we were on, that red arrow, and we've just rolled over. Is there any equivalency to this as you look back on our financial history?
Oh, well, we've been in much worse times than this. Early 1930s. Remember, 38 states, the banks were entirely closed. So we're a long way from the early 1930s.
Thank you. When we're away from that, we're trying to restructure our banks. Henry Kaufman wants a nostalgia of partnerships, smaller banks. Other people talk about banks as utilities. Can banks be utilities?
I don't really think so, because utilities can't be very innovative. But partnership is, that has something to say for it. I mean, what was the big investment bank on Wall Street that didn't have deep trouble in 2008? It was Brown Brothers Harriman. They're a partnership. That really concentrates your mind powerfully.
How would you concentrate the minds of Mr. Pandit, Mr. Diamond, Mr. Moynihan, and the others of our big banks?
Maybe we should go back to having banks have double liability.
Explain that. That's jargon. That's a massive jargon alert. A great exclusive. John Steele Gordon stumps the band. What is double liability?
It used to be that banks were chartered. If they went bankrupt, the stockholders had double their liability, not just what they had invested.
I did not know this.
Just what they invested, but twice what they had invested.
So if I had $422, which was a lot of money back then, in a bank, I lost $844.
No, if you were an investor, not if you were a depositor. If you were a depositor, you were just wiped out.
But as an investor?
As an investment. If you were one of the stockholders of the bank, they could call upon you to put up twice as much money.
John Steele Gordon on Glass-Steagall. Good idea?
Right.
Bring it back?
Glass, not the original Glass-Steagall. Remember, Carter Glass, 2 years after he got the bill through Congress, he thought it was a mistake.
Let's look at this chart here. Animal spirits south of trend. This is a theme now. Nominal GDP. Today we'll talk to Mike McKee about this. My key number in today's report, 4% nominal GDP. Well, there we are, and there's a little bit of a disinflation in that regression, a little bit of downtrend. There's the crash. We come up, and we just got this rollover thing. Can inflation solve this? Take real GDP, throw some big inflation on it?
Well, inflation, certainly it helps the debt to GDP ratio because the debt's denominated in dollars, and that's what we did in the 1970s. We tripled the debt, but it actually went down as a portion of GDP. But of course, inflation has mighty big costs otherwise.
Here's a chart from the Congressional Budget Office. John Steele Gordon back to 1790. 1790, and then there's a Civil War, we paid that down, and then there's World War II, we paid that down, and you can see two projections out, frankly, both ugly and sustained. Your reading of our debt and deficit right now, can we really believe in a sustained deficit, even if we do all the good news we're planning? The debt's just going to be too high, isn't it?
Well, if the debt is not too high for us to bear right now. I mean, it was much higher after World War II. It was 129% of GDP. Now it's about 100% of GDP. But if it keeps on going, at some point, even the United States maxes out its credit card. And people are just not going to lend money anymore. And then I hate to think what would happen.
Well, quickly, when's the next book?
Probably next year.
Next year. John Steele Gordon, we're going to return. The number. Today was an auspicious day, I thought. And I was surprised it didn't get more splash. Bring up the number. Look at this, John. This is great. Pretty cool. We're a $15 trillion economy. Up from $10 trillion in 2001. There's some inflation in there, but we've been a $14 trillion economy for a long time. We have economic growth, but so much of the debate is about wealth distribution or income distribution. Is it as polarized as so many people discuss?
Oh, I think it's very polarized right now. I mean, the Democratic Party is much more liberal than it used to be. And the Republican Party is more conservative than it used to be, and they're often simply talking at cross purposes to each other.
Do you agree with our Matthew Dowd that Ronald Reagan would run to the left of all of the Republican candidates now?
Oh, I don't know about that. Depends. That's a semantic game more than anything else. But Ronald Reagan was a political genius.
When you study the history of the Republican Party, how do you perceive it, not as we look back to Reagan or Goldwater, but back farther? The Republican Party of today, is it anything like the eras that you study?
No. The Republican Party, of course, started off as an anti-slavery party. That was solved by the Civil War, a very expensive solution. And then it became, around 1900, the progressive wing of the Republican Party, under Theodore Roosevelt especially, grew and became much more influential. And they ended up being what, in the mid-20th century we were calling Rockefeller Republicans. And now they're often called rhinos, Republicans in name only.
Oh, well, I like that. Republicans in name only. Are there any out there to keep the mainstream Republicans happy, or are they going to have to go with Perry or Romney?
There are not many out there anymore.
We're in search of Edward Burke, the senator from Massachusetts, among others.
Okay.
From a few years ago. Let's look at this chart. Long-term view. Income tax GDP. And, whoa, we've rolled over. There's no shock there. Income tax to GDP at a very, very low rate. You wrote about the income tax, a short history of the income tax for the Journal the other day. What did you think about as you wrote that essay?
Well, to me, the big problem with the income tax today is that the corporate tax and the personal tax are completely unrelated to each other. It's as though the corporations were owned by Martians who are otherwise untaxed instead of being owned by earthly and very well taxed stockholders. And we need to integrate the two tax systems in order to achieve anything resembling fairness.
How would you do that?
Well, you could, in effect, turn all corporations into subchapter S corporations so that the profits flowed through to the individual stockholders.
Let's do Rajan Rajan if we could, folks. Earlier this morning on Bloomberg Surveillance, listen to Bloomberg Radio Plus. I spoke with Rajan Rajan, of course, of Chicago in the Booth School. I asked him if he would work at a bank that was a utility.
I wouldn't buy the stock, but it might be a safe place to work in. I think people hoping for a return of utility banking are probably hoping for too much.
Rajan of Chicago there, we were making a joke there about working at a staid and quiet bank. Are we going back to Madman banks? Are we going back to, before Chase Manhattan, the manufacturers Hanover? Are we going back to a quieter era where you make loans and you make a spread?
No, I don't think so. I think banking it can't go back. You can never go home again. There's certainly the reforms in the banking system that needed to be made. I'm sure some of the reforms that were made need to be unmade because they were a disastrous mistake in Dodd-Frank and Sarbanes-Oxley. But we're not going back to the good old days of 363 banking.
Please stop by again. I could talk to you for hours and hours. John Steele Gordon, read this. There's a lot of John Steele Gordon to read. How about this one? This is a wonderful book, An Empire of Wealth. Look at that. It captures a 20th century of a bit ago.